Okay, this video is going to be about the same topic as my last video was about, but with a little bit of a difference. It's about the landing, or sorry, I should say the descending of an aircraft and how they descend. My last video, which I will share in the description of this video, my last video was about the claim that's idiotic, a claim I tore apart in the past, but the claim is that that horizontal changes its own orientation in relation to itself. So wherever you stand right now, if you make a horizontal straight out in front of you, if you take one step forward and make your whole body goes forward 1 foot, their claim is that if you make another horizontal right there, that second horizontal is at a different orientation to the horizontal you made 1 foot behind you. It's absolute nonsense, right? I tore this apart through the use of the attitude indicator and what the plane actually does in my response to such nonsense, right? Now, I tore it apart years ago, but I've tore it apart in recent times as well when I made a response video to people on our opposing side, on the globe side, who were responding to the flight presentation that myself, Quantum Eraser, and Adam Meakin did back late in 2024 on the Quantum Eraser channel. You can find that on my channel. I might even link it actually in the description. And the video I made where I tore that nonsense apart is linked with that as well. It's in the description of that video, but I can link both of them. All that aside, this, right, is more based around a challenge, because that complete and utter nonsense that they were claiming, right, that you're just following a series of points around a curved surface and each point is a tangent and each tangent plane is at a different orientation to the previous tangent plane, yet they're all horizontal. Complete crazy nonsense. Impossible, completely geometrically impossible. You cannot have a horizontal or a vertical on a globe arc. Those things cannot exist because they are constant orientations, which is why all horizontals are parallel to each other and all horizontals are parallel to the plane of the horizon. And all verticals are 90 degrees to horizontal and all verticals are parallel to each other. That cannot happen, right, if the Earth was a globe. You cannot have a horizontal and a vertical. You can have a tangent and a line that's coming from the center of that globe as a zenith, going through that tangent and straight above that tangent, making a 90 degrees to that tangent. But that will be only at one point on the surface of their sphere. That will not be a vertical and a horizontal. It will be 90 degrees. You will create two 90 degree angles at either side of that vertical. But, sorry, no, it won't be vertical. Either side of that zenith, but they won't be a vertical or a horizontal. But there you go. I said vertical because no matter what we try and twist it, you just cannot get into the mindset of these people who promote a globe arc. It's impossible to get into their mindset. Reality always trumps, their minds and ours. I said vertical there because I was thinking of vertical, but in reality, within their paradigm, it can't be a vertical. It can be a zenith making a 90 degrees with a tangent at best. Do you know what I mean? And that's only geometrically within that crazy paradigm that doesn't exist, right? But the whole point of my last video was that when a pilot, right, in any plane, but we're going to use commercial airliners because they fly kind of not the highest, obviously the jet fighters and the Lear jets fly the highest, but as a general, let's say commercial planes, they're going to have a descent angle, right, whether they're pitching the nose down or they're descending by dropping in power, right, they're still going to have an angle that they're going to be dropping. So there's going to be a certain drop of, say, so many feet downwards as a horizontal distance is covered. So this plane, let's just say, on average, they drop at about a 3 degree descent rate from the horizontal. and it's based off of their altitude. And the horizontal here, what they're looking to do is, if this point here to be 1,000 feet above the airport, right? So they're looking to end up 1,000 feet. And I said this in my last video, but I'm saying it here in case people didn't see my last video. And I'll show the maths in a minute. They're looking to be 1,000 feet above the airport. So for that to happen, this brown line here needs to be parallel with mean sea level. So if we treat this line here as mean sea level, then that has to be parallel to the brown line for whatever length it needs to be. And consequently, that means the mean sea level has to be a horizontal. Because you have to remember, this is happening right now, at any moment. It's happening, could be hundreds of times, any moment, across the whole world. So all the airports in the world have the planes coming in to land at them, big and small airports with big and small runways and big and small planes are coming in to land. And to do this, they're all having a final approach and a descent. So they'll start at this point here where this plane is, and that'll be it's what's known as its top of descent. And that basically means from that point on, it'll be descending until it reaches this point, which will be 1,000 feet above the altitude of the airport. So if the airport is let's say 3,000 feet in altitude, right, which would be a very high airport. Let's just say 3,000 feet. Then the pilot wants to end up at an altitude of 4,000 feet. So that last 1,000 feet, the pilot will use to actually come in and land on the runway, right? Now, there's speeds taken into account and wind, obviously, and different things. But I'm not going into all that minutiae. I'm only dealing with this, the fact they're using trigonometry and a right angle triangle. That's all that matters, right? I just go into this one here. Maximum glide speed, right? Vertical distance, as you can see, horizontal distance, and there is the hypotenuse. So that'd be a hypotenuse, this would be adjacent, and this would be your opposite of your triangle that the pilot will account for, right? The planes do it, a lot of planes do it now today themselves, but that doesn't change the mathematics. It still have to be the same. They still have to treat the Earth as a flat plane when they're doing this. There's no way around it, regardless of the length of the horizontal, right? And as I said, horizontal can't exist on a globe, so how can that be a series of points that are being touched by tangent planes, and those tangent planes are all different at different degrees and angles to each other, yet they're all in the same orientation? It's ridiculous, silly nonsense. I'm just going to read here. The maximum glide speed allows the airplane to cover the greatest horizontal distance for a given amount of altitude. No wind assumed. For instance, if the airplane's glide ratio at the maximum glide speed is 10 to 1, then the airplane can glide 10 miles horizontally for every 1 mile it is aloft. No wind and level terrains are assumed, right? No wind and level terrain assumed, right? So they don't deal with a curved earth when they're coming into land, because the whole flight they're dealing with a flat earth, and they're flying parallel to a flat earth. Right, mean sea level is a horizontal plane, and pilots fly airplanes regardless of the altitude. Right, they fly them when they're flying them from A to B. I'm not talking about if they're doing acrobatics. If they're flying from A to B, from one place to another, one airport to another, then they're treating the Earth as a flat plane, because that's what it is. They're flying parallel to mean sea level. That's what they're doing. And mean sea level is a horizontal, and they're flying horizontally. I could literally stop the video at this point. But unfortunately, there's a lot of stupid people out there, and a lot of dishonest people out there, who want to lie and argue and all the rest of it. So, I'm going to come in here a second. Just before I go through this is my video that I did, the last video. That's the one I will share in the description with the others. This down here, the first comment that you'll find, well, it depends on when you look, but you will find this comment from a guy called @TrevorAustin. This guy was claiming to be a pilot in the past. Then his claim went to he was a retired pilot, right? Now, this guy comes in attacking me here. Now, I haven't heard from this guy for a long while, because this guy disappeared when the flight data came out. That you will see in the presentation, if you care to watch, that I will share in the description. I asked, this was one guy, this guy is one of many pilots, several pilots, who who were on our opposing side, who was asking to get the flight data, who wouldn't get it. He didn't want to know about getting it, and he literally in the past, he was dishonest and he lied. And it has been shown on public live shows, his comments where he was lying and comments where he was wrong and just saying stupid stuff. Now he comes in here attacking me, basically. His whole comment here is a heap of rubbish. At no point does he address the fact that they're using a flat plane, that they're using trigonometry, as in he doesn't actually deal with it. He says they're not. It is not a 3-degree descent. Then he says, for a 3-degree descent, you set your power so you descend. It's like, so if it's not a 3-degree descent, how come you're dealing with a 3-degree descent in the rest of your comment? And the main thing is that what he's trying to do is push people away from seeing this video and seeing the one I'm going to make now. This video here I'm showing on screen and the video I'm making right now. He doesn't want people looking at those because it means that for all these years that he's been in this topic, he's been lying. It's about the size of it. He's been lying. So have the other pilots that claim it was a globe. And this is destroying him and people like him. So he's basically saying that I don't know what I'm talking about and I'm talking rubbish. He actually says, what are you spouting? What you are spouting is pure bollocks. That's what he says. When my claim is that they're using trigonometry and a horizontal baseline to land the plane, right? And I address the official globe claim that him and all the other people like him on the globe side try to make, right, in this video. And I show how this very landing system that is used, system of descent that's used by pilots, I show in this video here that is on screen, I show how it destroys their other claims, right? Even though I destroyed their other claims before, this is easier for people. They don't have to learn about certain things. This is easy for people to understand, so I did it this way as well. And this is just easier. I have 2 or 3 other ways to absolutely annihilate it that there's no way out of. But it doesn't matter. This is easy for everyone to understand and everyone to see. It's visual. Everything is good, right? So I use this way. So you have this guy here, Trevor Austin. He's coming in attacking, yet he's not addressing anything. He's just saying that I'm stupid and I've still got lead pipes in my home. You know, this nasty, stupid nonsense. When push came to shove, he wouldn't get the flight data. He wouldn't get the pitch data. He couldn't support any of his claims. And he even had to admit that he did fly with a 3-degree above horizontal pitch. You know what I mean? It's just like in the past. Like, so you will have people like that come in and attack. But he's saying basically that what I'm saying is total rubbish, right? Now, what I'm saying is that they're using trigonometry and they're dealing with a horizontal distance and the whole descent thing can only happen if the earth is flat because of what they have to do, which I'll go through in a minute. So just so that you know that I'm not just saying that, here is, right, here is Google. How do pilots use trigonometry? Question mark. Pilots utilize trigonometry for various flight-related calculations, primarily to determine aircraft speed, direction, and slope. This includes calculating wind correction angles, crosswind components for takeoff and landing, and determining the ideal landing and takeoff angles and speeds, even when affected by wind. Now, I'm not going to read all this. I'm just going down to landing and takeoff. Trigonometry helps determine the appropriate descent angle and ground speed for landing, as well as the climb angle and speed for takeoff, taking into account wind corrections. So this part is the part I want people to pay attention to. Trigonometry helps determine the appropriate descent angle. Right? Descent angle. The very thing that this claimed pilot here, or retired pilot, whatever he is claiming that I'm talking total bollocks about. No, there's no bullshit here. There's no rubbish here. That's exactly what it is. I'm claiming they use trigonometry. I'm claiming that, obviously, because they're using trigonometry, they have to deal with a horizontal plane. What I'm claiming is true. End of story. Anyone can check it out. What I'm claiming is true. Right? Here is straight away from AI overview on Google. Right? Straight away, it supported me. And if I come down here, how is trigonometry used in aviation? Right? Trigonometry is used to calculate the speed, direction, and slope in order to determine an airplane's path from landing to takeoff. Trigonometry is used to determine the ideal landing and takeoff angles and speeds. Right, so if I click on that, right, distance travelled, descent angle, land, distance descended, right? And here you have basically your altitude. That would be top of descent, and that would be what you're after dealing with, right? It's in here, right? Here's another one, right? Where they're dealing with trigonometry. Another one. Am I lying? Am I talking rubbish? Or as this guy here calls it, bollocks? Am I? I don't think so. I think I'm just detailing. I'm not making anything up. This is just how it works, right? Here's another one, right? These are all based around trigonometry, right? And landing. So, now that everyone is fully aware and up to speed with all the nonsense, and they're fully aware that I'm not lying, I'm not a lawyer, I'm telling the truth, and I'm laying it out as it is laid out officially. Now we'll get on to the actual presentation, or I should say, this is more of a challenge, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. So, how does this work, right? This here is from G up to H is 36,000 feet. Now this is not the scale, so this is not scale. I just need to do it this way. I did it in scale in my last video with GeoGebra, but I need to do it in scale, or I need to do it this way so everybody can see everything clearly, right? Because when it's in scale, you have to go over and back across the page, and you can't see the whole lot at one time. So it doesn't matter. It'll be the same thing. So from G up to H is 36,000 feet, right? This red line. This little black line underneath it is 1,000 feet. So that means if H is where the airplane is, that's top of descent, the airplane is flying at 37,000 feet. Now, if the airport here, right, that it wants to land in and at, right, if that airport is almost at sea level, then that means that we subtract the 1,000 feet from the 37,000 feet, right? Because the pilot wants to end up 1,000 feet above the elevation of the airport. And if the airport is at sea level and they're flying at 37,000 feet, obviously they calculate for 36,000 feet, right? So how that calculation works, there's two ways, but the basic way is, right, you will put in 36,000, right, and you divide that, right, by 300, right, and that will give you the distance that you, right, that will give you the distance that you must start descending at, right, at an average of 3 degrees, so the average is 3 degrees, right, this will give you the distance for 36,000 feet at which you must start descending to end up above the 1,000 feet above the airport, right, so, right, so equals 120. Now I'm using statute miles. Normally they use nautical. I'm using statute, right? So just so nobody's confused. You can do it with nautical. It's the same thing. Whatever nautical is in 120, divide 120 by 1.1508 and you get the nautical. It's all the same distance, just different units. So, right, so this orange line is 120 miles, right? The slope here is of 3 degrees because when you divide the altitude you're determining for by 300, it's pre-assuming a 3 degree descent angle, right? Now, that means that that is how they do it. Literally, that is how they do it. And you can see I showed that from Google in my last video. That's how they do it. That's just a rule of thumb. There is another way where they divide by 1,000 and multiply by 3, right? But this way, I think, is more commonly used, or because it's this way is worked around a 3 degree descent, right? Basically, with the other way, you may not have a 3 degree descent. You could have a 2 degree descent or a 4 degree descent. But with this way, with the divide by 300, that'll give you a distance that's pre-assuming a 3 degree descent on average, right? So things to take into account, right? If the airplane is at the top of descent at H, and it wants to be here 1,000 feet above the airport here, right? And it's taking an average of a 3 degree descent angle, right? Then that pilot must start descending, and their top of descent must start, right, at G, which is 120 statute miles away from the airport. So that means that when the pilot does do this and descends towards the airport, that once they've reached 120 horizontal miles, right, statute miles, right, then they will be 1,000 feet above the airport. This is what they do, right? Now, I'm not saying there's not other things like wind taking into account, different speeds and different things. I'm not saying that, right? I'm not arguing with any of those things, right? My point is that they are dealing with a calculation that is dealing with a 120 statute, for this instance, a 120 statute mile horizontal distance. That's the point, right? Which means that for them to end up 1,000 feet above the airport, right, when they start the descent here, it means the airport here cannot be down here on a globe, because they will not be 1,000 feet above the airport. As I showed in my last video, the one I link, if they did that, the airport would be 1.837 miles below them. So that's not 1,000 feet, is it? That's like you're talking 8, 9, 10,000 feet, whatever it is, right? Right? Because you have 1.837 miles. So this is what brings them to 1,000 feet above the airport, this exact calculation. So how could they be flying over a curved surface if for that 120 miles, right, once they do the calculation and they travel 120 miles horizontally, how could the Earth be a globe and the airport be 1,000 feet below the altitude of the plane when they're finished this? It can't be. The Earth has to be flat for this to happen. There is no way out. So the main thing here is twofold. There's 3 points I want to make. Number one, this can't happen if the Earth's a globe. So the pilots can't be using this way of landing and descending. It should say descending, because the landing will happen once they reach to about 1,000 feet above the airport. But this function of descending, this can't happen. This calculation, this formula, can't be used and doesn't work if the Earth's a globe. But if the Earth is flat, it works perfect. And this is what they use all the time. Right now, in Heathrow Airport in London, in O'Hare Airport in Chicago, John F. Kennedy Airport in New York, and LAX in Los Angeles, and every other airport everywhere, right, there's pilots calculating using this exact formula and ending up, right, basically where they need to be at the altitude above the airport they need to be at. Right? That's what they're doing. Right? So, first of all, take that into account. Secondly, right, the adjacent, right, when they're doing this calculation, the adjacent is orientated towards the ground. See this yellow line? That's the adjacent of the triangle. The purple line is the hypotenuse, and the red line is the opposite. This orange line, which is the adjacent, is orientated towards the ground, and it's parallel to sea level, right? And it's parallel to the altitude of the airport. Now, it doesn't matter if the airport is not at sea level. If the airport is higher, they're obviously not going to calculate for 36,000 feet. If they want to be 1,000 feet above the airport they're landing in is 3,000 feet high. They're going to take 4,000 feet from 37 and calculate for 33,000 feet or whatever, right? The point being is that we're pre-assuming that the airport is close to sea level, like with the Los Angeles LAX airport. It's close to sea level. So for that instance, from 37,000 feet, right, they'd be using this calculation from 120 miles away, statute miles. I know because I've been on the flights into LA, and it is literally what they say. At the distance away, you're talking 120 miles, the descent starts. We've all been in the plane. We all know what happens. You have to strap in, all that kind of stuff. All the trolleys have to be put away. You have to have your seatbelts on, blah, blah, blah. All the staff must be, the stewardesses and all that, they must be in their seats with the seatbelts on, right, for descent, right? It's not just for landing, it's for coming and for descent. And often that's like a half an hour before they actually land, right? So a plane that's flying 500 miles per hour could slow down to 300 or 250, and they would easily then cover that horizontal distance in a half an hour when they're coming in at their descent. The point is that they will be parallel to the elevation of the airport. So it doesn't matter if the airport is 3,000 feet above sea level. That means that from their point when they start the descent, that the airport elevation must be parallel to the adjacent that they're calculating with. And both of those must be parallel to mean sea level. But that can't happen if the Earth's a globe, as I pointed out. Now, so we have two things. Number one, this can't happen if the Earth's a globe. Right? You cannot use this formula, this calculation, this way of using trigonometry in this fashion if the Earth's a globe, because it doesn't work, obviously, right? Number one. Number two, the adjacent is orientated towards the ground. This is very important, right? Right. This is what they do in reality all the time. So that means it's orientated towards mean sea level, and so is the airport altitude, orientated towards mean sea level, right? So both of these are orientated towards mean sea level, and the orange line is orientated towards the Earth, basically, right? Third point is this requires parallel zeniths. So the zenith from the airport and the zenith up to the plane, if we just use even the 1,000 feet point, right? It doesn't matter whether it's this or if we add on one here. The point is that they will be parallel. They won't be divergent, so they won't be meeting at the center of a sphere Earth. They will be parallel. There is no if, buts, or maybes about it. They must be parallel for this process to happen. So that means the plane is not flying around the globe at any point prior to this, right, or after this. It's flying over a flat plane. But people like that guy Trevor Austin, right, and other losers on our opposing side want to claim different. Now they have no proof. They keep getting I keep, and others people keep producing the evidence that they're talking rubbish, right, as I'm doing now. But they keep on wanting to argue. So okay, if the Earth is a globe, then this is how you're going to have to calculate it. Now we're going to see, right? We're going to see now if they can prove that globe. If the Earth's a globe, you cannot calculate, right, from the top of descent, right, like we calculated before, right, in the same exact way, to be 1,000 feet above the airport. Because if the Earth's a globe, right, the elevation of the airport is going to match this point here in an arc, right? So this is where the airport is going to be, right? 1,000 feet above the airport will be here, but 1,000 feet above it will be here. So what they must calculate for, if I just get, let me see, just give me tools and a tape and line, right? I'm just going to bring that down to about that, maybe a little bit more, about that, right? So what they must calculate for is if, right, that's their altitude and they're 36,000 feet, right? 37,000 feet above this point on the globe, right? That means that 1,000 feet up, they're 36. If they make a tangent at 36,000, well, so they won't be able to make a tangent at that because it won't be touching the globe. So I'll put it down here. So that means from this point here, that this tangent is touching, right? That they're going to be 37,000 feet directly above that point. 1 second. Sorry, dry throat from talking. Right, but they're 37,000 feet above this tangent. Below this tangent, behind this tangent, and the point at where the airport will be, right, that airport is not going to be 37,000 feet below their point, because they're 37,000 feet and another 1.8 plus miles above the airport, as I showed before. So what they're going to have to do is they can't calculate for 37,000 feet, removing the 1,000 feet. What they must do, I'll just remove that line, is they must take the 36,000 feet that they will be calculating for, and they must add that to the amount of feet in 1.837 or 1.837 miles, right? They must add that, right, to that. So that gives them 45,700 feet that they have to calculate for, not 36,000 feet. So they're calculating for this situation on a globe to happen, they have to calculate for almost 10,000 more feet. I'll show you what happens there, right? Now, before I go into that, what I must point out is, before I do that, and what they must do is they must orientate the adjacent towards the sky. So the adjacent is orientated towards the sky. For this to happen, they must do that, right? They can't orientate it towards the ground because it won't work. They must orientate the adjacent towards the sky and fly along the hypotenuse this way, right? So opposite to the adjacent, they must, right, if you know what I mean, they can't orientate that towards the ground and do the calculation because it won't work, right? They can only do that if the earth is flat. Then they can calculate for 37,000 feet, removing the 1,000 feet and dealing with the 36,000 feet. But on a globe, they must add the extra, right? So if I take, right, what is it, 45,700, so 45700, and I divide that by 300, that'll give us 152.33 miles. So let's just say 152 miles, right? So that means that 152, almost 153 miles away from the airport, they must start their descent. And their slope of descent, if anyone wants to care to do the maths, I'm not going to do it all now because I don't want this video to be too long, even though it'll be long anyway. It will be 3.252 degrees. So instead of it being a 3 degree, it's going to be 3.25, right? Because they won't be able to have that, they need to have a 3.25 degree angle, right, of descent, and it needs to last for 152.33 miles. Now, the problem with that is this. In reality, for an average of 3 degrees of a descent, they'll be using 120 statute miles, not 152 statute miles. What it actually means is that for a globe, right, to exist, and for them to do this descent, right, they've got to start almost 33 miles, 33 miles, right, prior to when they do have to start in reality doing their descent. So the top of descent has to be almost 33 miles prior to when they do it in reality. Now this is the problem. This is the challenge that's going out there to any commercial pilot, right, who wants to try this. If you want to prove it's a globe, then you've got to, this is the only way you can calculate it for a globe. This is it. There is no other way. This is the only way it'll work. So if you want to prove you're flying over a globe, then you've got to start your top of descent, 153 miles, statute miles, before the airport, if you're flying at 37,000 feet, right? We'll use the challenge as 37,000 feet, calculating, you'll be, right, using the 36,000 with the extra 1.8 whatever miles. You've got to start your descent at 153 miles away, right? And it's got to be 3.25 degrees. This is the challenge. Now listen closely, everyone. If the Earth's a globe, then they will be able to descend at 3.25 degrees, right, for 153 miles and end up 1,000 feet above the airport, if the Earth's a globe. If the Earth is flat, what will happen is they'll have to pull up because they'll be crashing into the ground. Because they'll be hitting the ground, which will be, just going to get, right. This will be Earth if it's flat, right? What they would try and claim to be a tangent. What will happen is their slope rate is going to intersect, right? Because they're going to start their top of descent 30 plus miles prior to when they would do it in reality, and their degrees is going to be slightly more than the average of 3. Their average is going to have to be 3.25. So the only way for them to reach 1,000 feet above the airport and it be a globe is that they've got to travel 100 and start their top of descent with this angle 153 miles away from the airport. Now, if they end up 1,000 feet above the airport, they've proven a globe. But they won't. They'll end up heading towards the ground and have to pull up. They'll either smash into the ground or they'll have to pull up. Because this does not work. So there you go. This is the challenge. You're claiming it's a globe, then get into your airplane, right? Get into your airplane, right? Do the maths this way, because this is the only way it works for a globe. It will not work the other way. The other way, the way they use in reality, only works for flat Earth, only proves the flat Earth. If you're claiming it's a globe, then this is how you must do it. There is no other way that's going to work. This is how you must do it. You must calculate for 153 miles away for 37,000 feet. That's the only way you can do it with a 3.25 the slope angle. And you have to do that. You have to go that whole distance, right, with that slope angle and then up 1,000 feet above the airport. But we all know that won't happen because we all know you'll smash into the ground before you ever reach that. Because you'll be 30 miles or whatever it is, maybe more, right, too far away from the airport because the Earth's flat. And if you were to do it correctly, you would end up doing that, right? And you would end up 1,000 foot above the airport. So they cannot travel 120 statute miles for 37,000 feet. For 37,000 feet, well, for them it has to be an average of 3.25 degrees. They have to have 153 miles of top of descent glide path. They cannot have 120 statute miles for 37,000 feet. So if they're claiming it's a globe, and you're really claiming it, then here is your challenge. This is a do or die situation. If you're claiming, prove your globe. Get in that airplane and prove your globe. Right? Adhere to these mathematics. Don't come up with anything new. Adhere to this altitude. Adhere to these mathematics. Because these will work. These will work if there's a globe. The exact mathematics there of 153 miles and a slope of 3.252 degrees, right? They will work, right, for 37,000 feet. You will end up, if it's a globe, 1,000 feet above the airport. If it's a globe, if it's not a globe, you better pull up fast because you're going to be heading to the ground very fast. Just letting you know. Because what's going to happen is 30 miles before you're hitting the airport or whatever, you're going to be hitting the ground. Just letting you know. But if you really believe it's a globe, then you get in that airplane and you do it. Let's see you prove your globe. Come on, take on the challenge. Let's see what you're made of. Do it. You're talking for years. Let's see you do it. But we all know what's going to happen. Thanks for watching.